Capone, written by Deirdre Bair. It's about his life, legacy, and legend. Most people have heard of Capone. He's kind of famous around the globe. He was the son of Italian immigrants to New York City. He had older brothers. I know he had a younger sister. And as many did in the time, they left school at about the age of 14 because of the way they were treated and just a lot of things. He was smart. He eventually got himself a real job that paid very little, and he was spotted out on the streets. He was a big guy. For an Italian, he was about 5'10", and he was just kind of a big guy. And so as a little bit of extra money on the side, he was running errands for the unsavory types out on the streets. He, in his later teens, met his would-be wife, and he had a young son. He got himself into a scrape, and I think he beat somebody very badly in the process, and so the crime boss he was working for, what they did was move him to Chicago. And that's how he ended up in Chicago, running bootlegging and all the rest of it. He grew. And what you would find out is you hear about his flashy dressing and, the diamond-studded belt buckle and things like that. But he patterned himself on crime bosses that came before him. He really wasn't doing anything others hadn't done. He grew. You really get the feeling that he spent a lot of, there were people always around him. He wasn't with his wife and family that often during those years. And it's a lot of hard work to be in the business of crime. He would not have been who he was or reached the fame level he did if it hadn't been for Prohibition, because that's where the big money was. He also was into brothels as well as gambling. It follows through his life. He was being convicted and went to prison by the time he was just, I think, around 31. They did get him on tax evasion, which was a new thought at the time. And what led to it was the flashiness. And apparently hoodlums had always been somewhat flashy, but a woman who was a female attorney during this time noticed his dress when everyone else didn't pay attention to the flashiness, because that's just what hoodlums did. And they eventually, J. Edgar Hoover and different ones eventually came to the conclusion that, yeah, they would get him on tax evasion. Capone tried to deal with the IRS and say, what do I owe you? I'll pay you. But they weren't going to let him get away with all that. And he was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison, where he began serving it locally. But then they moved him to Alcatraz out in the Bay in San Francisco. He should have never been sentenced to Alcatraz, because that's where lifers were. And he'd been sentenced to 10 years of prison. So they were out to send a message to him and the public and everything else. By the time he was in prison, alcohol was legal again. It's a very detailed book. You don't hear much about Capone's private or personal thoughts, but a few things did come out when he was in prison. And apparently the press pinned quite a bit on him that he did not do. And he had paid off some officials who took the money and didn't do exactly what he wanted to do either. So it's a big conspiracy. Very good book, very detailed book. There are some black and white glossies in it, but it's hard work to be a gangster.